none of us can play. But it's fun, and that's what it's about. Now there's some who, it's the circus and the gladiators and the this are just trying to distract us from that, blah blah blah, whatever. Just enjoy the game. Can we just enjoy the game and have a good time and go to work tomorrow? Because that's what it's all about. What a great time to get together and enjoy this activity. And that's an okay thing. But as a society, it should concern us that as a group of people, we haven't figured out a way to come up with some type of an event that can unify the country quite like a Super Bowl or a World Series or for those who may or may not, the NBA Finals. I know that's terrible, but or the Stanley Cup. How have we not figured out a way to get the entire world collectively rooting for a relationship with Jesus Christ, other than a holiday that we've kind of hijacked into being a retail kind of thing? But we live in a Christian nation, amen? I mean, we are less and less enthusiastic about saying that these days. But that should be our goal. That should be our aim. To live our lives in such a way that other people want to celebrate the reality of what we know, the hope we have, the living hope that we have, that everyone can celebrate it. And so there's a lot of things that I want to address in the weeks coming as we sit with the backdrop of the empty tomb. What I want to talk about is reining in this life that we have. And it's REIGNING, so, our God reigns. That's the whole idea. Last week we talked about what it looks like to pray for the reign of God. And so going forward this week, we're going to talk about what it looks like to bring our lives under the reign of God. And then we're going to get specific in weeks to come. We're going to talk about what it looks like to bring our marriages under the reign of God. What it looks like to bring our finances under the reign of God. What it looks like to bring, just our conversations at work or within our family under the reign of God, under the umbrella of the authority and the rule, the sovereignty of the God of creation. And remember, one of the things that we have a problem, I mean, just as a species, we have a problem keeping a correct or adequate or healthy perspective. And that's really what we need to have, is a perspective on this life so that the reign of God isn't some foreign concept. One thing that I do, and it's funny, I think, and some others know, and it seems insignificant. But let me tell you something. And this might be a warning. I don't know. I mean, take it however you want. But I promise you, you are not going to out-bad park me on this parking lot. You are not going to out-bad park me, period. And if that's a warning, a challenge, whatever you want. So, as you know, my truck, I always park it way down here, because I went to some church growth seminar, blah, blah, whatever, and they talked about how important it is for new people and the community to be able to come into a parking spot and just get a spot right up front and walk on in. Because if you think about it, one of the hardest things to do is change your life and come to church and all that kind of stuff, so we need to make it as easy on them as possible. Now, I'm not legalistic about parking, but I'm legalistic about my parking. And so what I do is I park in the worst spot down here, and I walk up there. Well, for one, I'm proud that I can still walk. Some of you have a hard time doing that, and it takes, it takes Ken longer, an hour and a half to get in from the front door. So he needs to park up front. I'm just saying. But so my friend Scott this morning, he said, well, I'm going to take the worst spot. And I said, no, you're not. So, I mean, and let me just tell you, I'll park in these people's backyard back here if I have to. I mean, because I have no shame or awareness of appropriate behavior, just so you know. But even something as insignificant as where you park, because when I pull in, and I made that a thing, just because when I come in this, where I start my adventure on Sunday morning is a reminder of why I am here. And why I am here is not about me. It's not about reinforcing my own importance. And I believe that that's one of the irrelevancies of the church these days is we have become a consumer-oriented organization to where we got to make this as palatable and as fun and as whatever for the world. And it's just a consumer-driven model. And we've got to get back to a point where God reigns, not me. And it's as small, if you think it's got to be all the big things, don't lie to yourself. It's the little things like a parking spot. And now, people think I park way away at Walmart just because I don't want people to door ding me. Well, it's just it's sort of my little legalistic thing for myself now is to got to park way away. Now, the door dinging thing is just an added bonus. And it gives me time to get my mind right before I go into Walmart, the saddest place on earth. But what does it feel? What does it look like to rein it in? To bring in our lives under the reign of God. It's doing the big things and the little things to remind us on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, or even a minute-by-minute basis that God reigns. And we don't just say that as a cheer, as a song. It's like, hey, our God reigns, look at us go. It's to remind us that our God reigns, that he rules, that he's the shot caller. I am not. He is the maker of all of the holiness, everything. I am not. And that looks specific. And we read in Psalm 93, the Lord reigns. He's robed in majesty. We read about his justice and his mercy. I mean, remember in 1 Peter where it says, because out of his mercy, out of all the goodness of God, out of his mercy, he's given us a new birth into a living hope. I mean, there's all these great things about God, his mercy, his compassion, his patience, his generosity, all of these things. And the Bible says that true and living God reigns, but sometimes it kind of doesn't feel like it, does it? It kind of doesn't feel like that there is a benevolent, all-knowing, all-loving, all-compassionate, all-merciful, all fair and justice, all that. It kind of doesn't feel like that God is in so much control. And there's a reason for that. The reason is because when life feels out of control, it's because we've, somewhere along the way, dropped the reins. We've dropped the concept of God reigning. So now, in today's sermon, it's kind of opposite day, right? Because grabbing the reins is not the same as grabbing the reins. And dropping the reins, I'm talking about horses, and how, riding an animal. And dropping the reins is not the same, and picking up the reins is not the same. We're talking about the reign of God, and it's always opposite of what we think about. See, when it feels out of control, it's because there's an issue with the reign. There's an issue with the sovereignty. There's an issue with the ruler. Look at Genesis chapter 3. This is where it all starts. This is where all of the reigns of God starts to get confused and the waters get muddied and things kind of go off the rails, because in Genesis 3 we have the example of Adam and Eve stepping for the first time outside of the will of God. Not outside of the sovereignty of God, but outside of the will of God. And it's important that we understand the difference between the two. No matter what we do, no matter what we choose, no matter what path we go, no matter what happens, God is sovereign over all that we see and know. And his will exists within that, but he has given us the freedom within the love of God. He's given us the freedom in the nature of love to choose within his sovereignty whether or not we want to live within his will. And what happens is that in Genesis 3, we have an example of what it looks like to step outside of the will of God. We have Adam and Eve. We all know the story. He said, you can eat of anything you want, but don't eat of that tree right there, because that's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And there's a little bit of a debate on the language there and what it actually means. And I personally, and I invite you to study it and look at it, write down the different ways that it could mean, and really investigate what this tree really is and represents. Because it isn't so much that our eyes are opened and now we know that evil is good. The knowledge of good and evil exists because God said this is what you do, and we all know that that's good. But the whole concept of the tree is that who says what's good and what's evil? God says, I will tell you that living dependent on me. And this isn't a righteousness thing or you did bad. I mean, it's just a choice. It's either depend on me, depend on God, depend on his holiness, his provision, his generosity, his everything, depend on him, or do you want to depend on you? And so the tree of knowledge of good and evil is really a tree of determining good and evil. They said, no, I got it from here, God. And and that's when the trouble started. That's the fall. That's the choosing of self-reliance. And enter doubt. Enter selfishness. Enter the source of all of the friction that we have between one another. Think about this. What we are celebrating today in our culture is kind of at the core of what's wrong with everything, and that is competition. I mean, think about it. When total dependence on God was abandoned, now it's me against Matt for resources. It's me again. I mean, he even says, and ladies, women, he said, when this is going to happen, you are going to, you're going to, there's pain and childbirth and all this. But what does he say about the relationship between women and men? That's when it fundamentally went wrong, because that's when competition, and now it's just all friction. And then, we have people that tout, I'm a very competitive person. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying being competitive is bad. I'm just saying that it kind of wrecks the whole thing. So, if that works for you, great. I'm being facetious. You know what I'm saying. But when we have to compete, I mean, why do countries go to war? Why? We're competing for who has the most money. We're competing for who has the most resources. We're competing for who has the most moral high ground. We're competing for everything. And so when God does not reign, when God is not, when he is not the source of everything, and Jesus even points this out, he's saying, you guys will chase after all of these physical needs, and wouldn't it be nice if you just relied on the creator of all that you see and know to satisfy those needs, because once you let go of satisfying those for yourself, you realize a whole new world is satisfied. You realize a whole new world of complete and utter dependence and provision. When life feels out of control, it's always because we've dropped the reins. Think about Matthew 19. What's that a story of? The prodigal son. You know, he says, look, I want to control things. I want to be in control. You know what we know that story. If you don't know it, it's in Matthew 19. I encourage you to read it today. But there's a dad. He's got two sons. One's a good boy, and one is Shane Hines. And the Shane Hines one says, hey, I want my inheritance now, and I want to be in control. Dad says, well, that kind of hurts a little bit, but here's your money. And then he goes off into a foreign land, and he squanders it, and he wastes it, and he ends up in a terrible life in a pig pen with all the things that pigs do in the pen, and he is just miserable. And he says, you know what? The slaves in my father's house have it better than me. I'll go back and beg for mercy just to be a slave in his house. If you know the story, you know the ending of it. He goes back. He starts to tell his dad, hey, I'm sorry. I've done this. I've done that. His dad stops him and says, I love you. I forgive you. I've been waiting for you to come back. He gives him everything that he lost, he restores to him. What would that story look like if it was the story of our lives? Because we have wall-to-wall carpeting in our pig pens. We have HVAC and pantries and for refrigerators. And some of us even have garage refrigerators. What would it look like if the Bible had said, and the son went into a foreign land and he made some really savvy investments and he doubled his money and then he had a big, vast empire and he had this and chariots and who? You mean you tell me? Let me tell you something. That's the prodigal son. That's the prodigal son story that I'm living. I mean, I've weed-eated around the pig pen. I've made it really nice. And I mean, you know what I'm saying? You know the example, you know the analogy I'm making. But I want to call the shots. I mean, that story reminds me of one of my favorite things I love to hear. And, you know, Steve was talking about, having a lot of kids. And by the way, that'll teach me to go to the restroom, right before you get up. I walk in and I hear my name. I'm thinking, well, this is never good. But Steve said, these are my boys. Those are my, and he talked about people with multiple kids. And then I got a tap on my shoulder and my daughter saying, that's you. Because, we have 6 of those. A couple of them are priced to move if anybody's looking in the market. I'm just saying. But you know one of my favorite things kids say? John, you're going to love this. Well, I bought that with my money. You know how kids will get a little bit of money? They'll get something from, they'll get a card with like $20 in it from grandma or grandpa, or they'll do a little something extra around the house and you'll have pity upon them and you'll give them a little extra this or that or whatever. And they got their money. And they're going to spend that however they want to. I'm thinking, oh, okay. Well, that's where we are, Mrs. Big Britches. You got your money. All right. Well, you know what's due, just oddly enough, what's due right now? Your rent. How much money you got now? Oh, you want to go to the basketball game? Okay, well, that's gas money, and have you ever seen how much gas costs? Do you even know that gas costs money? But isn't that us when it comes to our relationship with God, is that, we depend on God for certain things, but when we get outside of the realm of, let's say, going to heaven, we're going to spend our money. I'm going to spend my time the way I want it. I'm going to love things that I want to love. I mean, we're just like little kids telling God, oh, well, this is my money. This is my time. I mean, God, you had your time. It's called Sunday morning. And this is my time. This is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to pursue all of the things. I'm going to invest the money that I have demanded of you, and so that my pig pen can get just a little bit more comfortable, because this is what I have built. And it's time to rein it in. See, I'm afraid that what's happened to many of us is we don't understand the goodness. We don't properly understand. We don't have a perspective of the goodness of a relationship with God enough to value it. Enough to value it over all things. Enough to crave it in all situations. From our small perspective. I mean, this is something that's been, like I've said before, this right here is the most bizarre thing I do, because I'm standing up here telling you about a God that I don't completely understand, and I am chasing daily. And I've written this word down everywhere that I can, vast, because I have to constantly be reminded about how small my perspective is, so that I understand the enormous reality of a relationship with the God of all that we see and know. And one thing I've realized is that my mind is not blown enough. I mean, we read things in this book that should just absolutely send us into orbit, and we act like, well, yeah, of course he did. And it doesn't change a thing. But living under the reign of God looks so bizarre to those who aren't. And he's calling us to that, so that we will experience it and they will know, because it is open to all. We don't understand. I want to read that. I wrote that down, and I want to read it like that. We don't understand the goodness of a relationship with God enough to value it over all things. And grabbing the reins is letting go. This is the last thing we'll say, and then we'll get out of here. Grabbing the reins is letting go. It's letting go of our pride, letting go of our perspective. We don't know all that we think we know. And that is a scary, safe place to be when we're conceptualizing the reign of God. You see, because in Proverbs 4:12, he tells us there is a way. There's a way that seems right to a man or a person. Bible tells us, look, from your perspective, there's a way that seems like, well, that ought to work out. That's how the world works. But it goes on to say, but in the end, it leads to destruction. I mean, there's a way, because, you think about all of the things that we do that make sense to us. Like when Jesus says, give us this day our daily bread, there's not one of us in here that lives day-to-day bread-wise. And he's telling us, don't worry about what you're going to eat and what you want. Let me tell you something. The older I get, one thing I realize, what has sustained and provided and fed and all that is my ability to work and be employed. And so as I get older, guess what happens? That diminishes. And I'll stand before you this morning, I'll be honest with you, I'm scared of what that looks like when I'm older. I'm scared of what it looks like for me not to be able to get up at the crack of dawn and go in and do a job and rely on a pay. I'm worried about that. Jesus says, don't worry about it. I said, well, I am. I mean, we're talking about real life here, folks, right? We're talking about the reality of being a spirit walking around in a flesh suit that needs provision. He's saying, guys, you don't know what you think you know. No, I know. I got to be able to work. I got to be able to, depend on me. What does that look like? This is the way that seems right, but in the end, It leads to death. It leads to destruction. It leads to what we call separation between God and his creation. Because you know what the reign of God looks like? You know what it sounds like coming out of our mouth? Sounds like a couple of guys, sounds like three dudes with crazy names getting threatened with being burned alive. You know the story in Daniel 3? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? They're like, hey, I am going to live under the reign of God. Well, we're going to throw you in this furnace. And they said, well, we're still not going to step outside of the reign of God. They said, we're going to throw you in this furnace. They said, well, our God is able to save. But say it with me now, but even if he doesn't, that would be good on a shirt. Even if he doesn't. Even if he chooses to let me burn up and die, I will not step out of the reign. I will not step out of the sovereignty of his kingdom. I've had many opportunities standing right there at the fiery furnace. And I'm afraid I have yet to be thrown in. Because I want to live under the reign of God like that. I want to live under the dependence of God like that, where it's like, look, Lord, if you don't send manna from heaven, I reckon I'll starve. Can we put our lives in his hands to that extent? Because if we do, he promises us there's an experience now and then that's unlike anything that we could ever ask or imagine. There is a peace, there is a joy, there is a contentment, there is a provision that is in store for anyone who would depend on God, even if he doesn't. What part of your life needs more rain? What part of your life needs more God, needs more control from the maker of heaven and earth? I would tell you mine, but the list is longer than we have time. Where in your life could you use a little bit more rain? As together we stand and as we sing.